On January 28th, they had deployed 13 mutual aid agencies along with OPD to do what they did.
Wow.
And Occupy, with the full agreement of the other community agencies, decided that the security concerns were not for OPD, they were for the City of Oakland, and this had to go on. So here we are. We will have a number of speakers, and the original idea was to be based around a forum of people telling their stories, which is very powerful. We have speakers, very important speakers, who will give context and background and lots of information so that their stories can be used by the community to make a difference in their policing. I'd like to introduce Sarah Misner. She's going to give guidelines for the forum, the telling of stories, and then we will introduce our speakers.
Good evening, family.
Good evening.
First off, we wanted to say thank you to Alan Michon.
Yes.
For any of you that aren't aware, Alan is the owner of the Grand Lake Theater. And this has been a pillar in the East Bay community and supported all of the work that Occupy Oakland has done so far, and has been a long-standing supporter of radical movements in the East Bay. So there's a lot of gratitude there. He's asked to allow us to give us 1 minute to Cynthia Papermaster, so she can make an announcement regarding a forum that will be coming up next week.
Thank you.
I just took a bite of popcorn. This is really scary because I'm going to talk about something just for 1 minute of your time that may not be a popular idea here. But there's a 2012 election coming up right this year. And if you could gaze a moment at DC and not at Oakland, just for a moment, look to DC for a moment and look at what's happening. We have corporate criminals running our government. And everything we do is being affected by that. And I'm saying that in 2012, we don't have to accept voting for a Democrat or a Republican. We can vote for what we want and take it over. So, get one of these flyers before you leave tonight. Right here at the Grand Lake Theater the morning of February 18, we're going to be discussing occupying the 2012 election. We're inviting Greens, Peace and Freedom, Justice Party. Rocky Anderson, who's running for president, will be here, just as a participant in the audience or maybe up front. We want all community groups to come. Anybody who thinks that they can advance their agenda, their wish for justice, social, environmental, human rights justice, all the justice that we deserve to have, we can take this and make it our election in 2012, and we don't have to do what they give us the choices to do. We can do what we want to do. Thank you. See you on the 18th, 10:30 in the morning till noon. Refreshments, music, and a wonderful community gathering. Thanks.
So the OPD has a long-standing history of abuse in Oakland, and we're not going to try to encapsulate that all tonight. I do want to recommend reading Cami Graves' article, Why OO Keeps Capturing Headlines, in which she outlines the historical abuses of the OPD, especially with regards to people of color and people living in the conditions of poverty in our communities. But tonight's parameters are on the OPD as they relate to Occupy Oakland. So, the community constructs its historical understanding of experiences. And unfortunately, we all know too well that generally the oppressors have the monopoly on history. So what we don't want to do tonight is use oppressive behavior that would devalidate someone else's experiences with what has happened to them. So the request this evening from the organizers of this forum is to engage in mutually respectful behavior that supports and validates various experiences, that does not seek to re-traumatize our friends, our family members, and our comrades, and instead creates a space for healing. So we can continue to do the radical work we're doing, right? So to start off this evening, I want to go ahead and invite Rita Brock up. She's from the Interfaith Tent of Occupy Oakland. And she's going to discuss a little bit about the availability of chaplains and counselors.
Thank you all for coming. I've been on the planning committee, and it's been a privilege to help put this together. I'm up here on behalf of both Safer Spaces at Oakland and the Interfaith Tent. We have counselors and chaplains ready to support people who feel upset about anything they hear or see and need to just kind of talk or be comforted. I know that the presentation about some of the experiences that people have had at Occupy Oakland at demonstrations and marches is painful sometimes for people, and we just want you to know that there are people who want to support anyone who feels a need to debrief or just to step outside for a minute and just sort of regroup. We all are wearing these little gold armbands, and I think most of us are sitting along the aisles, so you can find us if you want somebody to talk to. We'll also be kind of watching out if people look like they're leaving and are upset. We just want to make sure that everybody has the support they need to be here, to listen carefully to things, and to be part of the community and not be so upset that they can't stay. So feel free to reach out to us if you want to do that. We also, if you feel yourself later on being upset or you need to work through some of the stuff that's happened to you, there's on the sign-up table outside is a list of places you can go for counseling and help that Safer Spaces has prepared, and you're welcome to take that sheet and call somebody later. So thank you for being here.
We want to make sure that that space is available. We've been through some pretty traumatic experiences, and we need to understand that there are many different ways that people heal and make space for that in our community. Someone over there's waving. I'm like, who's that? So now I'd like to invite up Ms. Janice Embry of People United for a Better Life in Oakland. And she'll speak a little to the history of OPD treatment of the people living under the conditions of poverty and people of color in various communities in Oakland. So please welcome her.
Hi. Actually, I can give this history of the Oakland Police fairly briefly. At its inception, the Oakland PD, as well as the Alameda County Sheriff's Department, have a sordid history, a sordid beginning. And I'm thinking, as a person of color, back to when they decided to recruit a good number of their officers from the Klan in the South. So that's my first perception of the Oakland Police, as well as the Alameda County Sheriff's Department. As well as Oakland, because Oakland hosted a huge Klan meeting during that time. As we come forward, some of you here in Occupy have learned firsthand what a number of people of color have known for a very, very long time here in Oakland, as well as all over this country. As the 99% of people in Oakland's jails, people of color are looking to you, Occupy Oakland, as the 1% who are enjoying the comfort and succor of our wonderful Oakland Police Department, to bring attention to this matter. What I do is I represent people who bring claims against the police for their misconduct before the CPRB. And these claims can run from simple things, like an officer was rude to me, to something like someone in my family or some loved one was killed by the police. I can't talk about what that is. I can't talk about what I've seen, and I can't talk about those cases. But what I will tell you is that it's up to you, each of you, to decide how you're going to address and deal with the police problem. I've decided this is the best way I can. But I would say, since so many of you are in that 1%, I would remind you that one thing that we did do in 2005 was a survey by the police with 1,000 people whose names were taken from the police records of people who had been served, and I use that term very loosely, by the police. And my gosh, in 2005, the population of Oakland was approximately 35 to 36% African American, and yet it was 26% white. And you would think that we would have had something, some comment about the behavior of the police back then. However, surprise, surprise, the survey ended up saying that most people were satisfied with the behavior of the Oakland Police Department. That was in 2005. Interestingly enough, an examination of that survey found that African Americans, Latino males, and people in color in general were underrepresented, and therefore the survey found that there were 2 police forces in Oakland, one that served the white folks and one that served people of color. The behavior that occupies people have experienced is from the people of color police force. Our President, Barack Obama, has recently said that he wants us all to play by the same rules. I think we know that that is not going to happen. It has not happened. It has not happened in Oakland since as far back as the 1800s. It's not happening in Oakland right now. Some people are saying, well, I'm glad because the NSA, or negotiated settlement, is basically going to throw our police force into receivership. But do you understand what receivership means? Receivership means that the feds would take over our police force. And the number one thing that they would probably have on their mind is to bring the number of our police officers up to what the FBI says it should be. Jim can probably tell you more about that. But with the average cost of $162,000 a year for each police officer, where do you think we're going to get that money from? Who do you think will step in and give us that money? Well, we do have the Port of Oakland, don't we? And it's strategically located in the City of Oakland. And I'm just wondering if we could possibly militarize our police and take an end run around Posse Comitatus. These are things that you need to think about. These are things that I've thought about. These are real things that could happen. In every place where demonstrations and protests and riots have happened in this country, the draconian measures that have been put in place did not go away when the protesters and rioters left. Instead, they were brought to bear upon the traditional populations that will suffer and have suffered under that 2 police force margin. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Dr. Stan Oden. He's a longtime Oakland civic activist, now a professor at Cal State Sacramento, teaching urban issues. He's going to speak to historical and present issues of the people's responsibility to run their own police department. Dr. Oden.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here and be here in Oakland, friends here, and this is a very critical issue that you all and we all are dealing with as a country. And so I want to thank Cynthia and the organizers of this forum having me here. Now, I believe everyone is looking around the country at Occupy Oakland to see if Oakland can provide a template or a model or an approach to organizing and negotiating through the excessive and brutal actions of the police and seek a way to preserve the dignity of the community. I've been involved with Oakland politics and the politics of the police department since the 60s. I joined the Black Panther Party in the summer of 1968 here. I joined the Black Panther Party because I believe in self-determination of African Americans and of all people to determine their destinies in terms of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That's what's in the Declaration of Independence, and that's what the Black Panther Party used as a framework for what all people should have. I believe Occupy Oakland is within that framework, and so the reaction of the police is the same kind of reaction that was against the Black Panther Party back in the 60s, of course, with the shooting of Huey Newton, also with the shooting of Bobby Hutton, also with all the other tragedies that happened in Oakland. The Oakland Police Department has been culpable and has been corrupt in that manner. And it hasn't been not only the police department, but also has been the district attorney's office that has also been in collusion and in cahoots with the police department. I personally have seen the DA's office and the Oakland Police Department collude to frame an African-American man. I sat on a jury in which John Burris was the defense attorney, and we saw how the Oakland police was trying to frame an African-American man for a murder that he did not commit, and the jury saw it, the judge saw it, John Burris saw it, and it was just a typical way in which so-called justice, criminal justice, has been meted out here in this community. As a professor, I have always looked for the chance to look at sources and see what people have said historically about these kind of issues. And one person is Jerome Scorn, who has been a professor emeritus at UC Berkeley, as well as back at NYU. He's been the foremost expert on looking at police and police actions. And he wrote a very important book back in the 60s called The Politics of Protest, and the task force report submitted to the National Commission on the Causes of Prevention of Violence. And there was this one quote, if I can just read it, that I think really shows the connection from the 60s to today. It says, as discussed in our chapter, on anti-war protests, the escalation of the war led to growing frustrations and greater militancy on the part of protesters. Yet the police handling of protesters was often unrestrained and only increased the potential for violence in the immediate situation and for the future. Predictably, the escalation continued. Protesters grew bitterly angry, and as anger against the police became a major element in protest meetings and marches, the police grew to hate and fear the protesters even more.
Right.
Does that sound like Occupy Oakland, what's happening in Oakland? Yes, yes. So the parallel from what Dr. Skonik was talking about back in the 60s is very clear that that parallel is there today. And like one of the jobs that I had when I was here in Berkeley, I worked for the City of Berkeley for about 14 and a half years, and I had an opportunity to work in the city manager's office, and I was involved and in charge of investigating the complaints of excessive force by officers in Berkeley, and I was involved in going and questioning and investigating the complaints that the citizens made and looking at that and adjudicating that and giving a recommendation to the city manager. Now here was a former Black Panther going and talking to the police department saying, hey, what did you guys do here? Did you do this thing right? And then giving a recommendation to the city manager saying, well, this is the kind of punishment that you get or not get. Now, that was a process that I was involved in back in 1988, 89 in Berkeley. I haven't followed what has happened in Berkeley in terms of the CRB. I know Oakland has a CRB, but it has to have teeth in it, it has to have power in it if it's to mean anything. But the power really comes from the people. The power comes from you all. The power comes from the community. The police department is a department of the city. The city council and supposedly the mayor is supposed to be in control of the police department. They should be the ones who say, no, you do this or you don't. They should not have come into the encampment the way they did, all the different times they did, if there was a humane way of looking at these things. And also, it's ultimately the citizens. You all have the power to change these police procedures and practices to make the Community Relations Board as strong as it should be. The police do not want civilian review boards because they've always been the way. Dr. Skonik talked about how police office associations have always politicized the whole nature of policing to favor their situation. In Oakland, we've always had a history of right-wing police officers. The police live outside the city. There needs to be community control of the police, just as the Black Panther Party talked about, and also talking about the police should come from the community, so they can have the same kind of notions to what it means to live in the community and to try and build up the community. So like, I'm going to stop here, only to say that ultimately the people have the control over the police, and we need to find ways and mechanisms to pull together to keep Oakland in the limelight as a city that can make the moves for all the people. Thank you very much, and pardon the people.
Thank you, Dr. Onan. Our next speaker is Jim Channon, attorney, well known as representing plaintiffs in the Riders case and having a great hand in writing the negotiated settlement agreement. He has been involved in the progress or lack of progress of the Oakland Police Department in that NSA for about 10 years now. That is 5 years past the time that the judgment was set. Evidently, I think he will be talking about this federal receivership. He's quite involved in it. I did hear him speak, though, that the community is key in giving that control, the right kind of control, to people who are trying to reform the Oakland Police Department. Jim Channon?
Thank you. I've litigated over 20 wrongful death cases against police departments, including 6 here in Oakland. All of them involved families, with the victim being people of color. And I was active legally and also in the community for 23 years, 33 years before the Riders case came about. I subsequently have been part of the legal team that's filed 4 class action lawsuits against the City of Oakland in just the last 11 years. 2 of them I'm only going to mention briefly tonight. One is the Smith class action, in which a police officer here in Oakland used his authority to pull over Asian, mostly immigrant women, and subject them to sexual improprieties year after year after year. And the difference, at least as far as I can see, between Oakland and other police departments is this guy wasn't caught after 1 time or 2 times. He did it, well, we were able to trace it back 5 years before they destroyed the records. So that was one. The other one was in 2010, where it was discovered by Internal Affairs in Oakland that 2 out of every 3 search warrants involving narcotics was based on either false or perjurious testimony. John Burris and I represented 100 people whose houses were raided under false warrants, who were sent to jail, who were beaten, and every one of them, except for 1 person, was a person of color. I'm not going to talk about that tonight either. What I am going to talk about is the Riders case and the April 7th, 2003 protest at the Port of Oakland, which were the other 2 class actions that I was involved in. The Riders case went on for at least 4 years. Again, very hard to say. The distinguishing feature was that the officers were able to do this over and over and over again, planting drugs on people in the Oakland community, forcing them to serve sentences aggregating 40 years in prison, giving them felony records that they did not deserve. And we ultimately, John and I, represented 129 people in that case. Again, 128 of them were people of color. All of them were compensated. But when we started the Riders case, we told the city officials in Oakland that we were going to try every single case unless we had a consent decree, or as they call it, a negotiated settlement agreement, because at that point, and certainly it's even more true now, we had just given up on trying to get compensation for individuals and thinking that would somehow transform the city and the police department, thinking that somehow they would pay a certain number of dollars and stop what they were doing. That policy was a failed policy, and we told them it was unacceptable in the Riders case. So we did negotiate the negotiated settlement agreement with the City of Oakland. It's online. I think it's even on the police website. And it calls for the police to meet certain standards in terms of writing policies, being trained for those policies, and then coming into practice compliance, which is actually doing the things that are written. And doing the things that are written has been a big problem for the Oakland Police Department, not only in this case, but their own general orders and their crowd control policy, which I'll get to in a minute. The negotiated settlement agreement is divided up into a number of categories. I can't go into them all now. They involve a fair internal affairs system, identifying problem officers before it's too late for them and for their victims, having a satisfactory span of control, in other words, making sure officers are supervised, having integrity tests for police officers, which means that such things are done so as leaving money out and seeing if it's turned in and things like that. A whole list of things which is set forth in the agreement. Well, when we started this agreement, I want to emphasize this agreement was not written by John and me alone. We had police experts, the police had police experts, including the former head of Internal Affairs in New York City, and the Oakland Police Department, the City Council, and the mayor all signed off on this and said they could do it. So this wasn't imposed on them, they agreed to it, they said they could do it. And in fact, at one of our first meetings, the OPD command staff came out and said, well, we're gonna have this all done in 3 years. Here are the compliance, we don't want 80% or 90% compliance rates, we want 100% compliance rates. Since then, however, they begged us to go to 80 or 85 or 90. But at that time, they wanted 100, and I looked at this and I said, you can do this in all this time, in such a short time? And they said yes, which showed me, and I've learned this lesson many times since, that they really don't have very good perceptive powers about what they can accomplish themselves, much less other things that they do. So this thing, we did get all the policies written. And they were approved, and we approved them. They are good policies. They were trained in the policies, and then came the part where they were supposed to do what the policies said. That's been the sticking point for the last 11 years. And we do not have practice compliance in key areas as of this date in internal affairs, in span of control, and in other critical areas. There have been some successes, integrity tests being one of them, but in general, it's taken too long. And the city has spent millions and millions of dollars in trying to get into compliance, hiring consultants and experts and so on and so forth. The first independent monitoring team lasted 6 years. They were paid a phenomenal amount of money, and then they just walked out. The second monitor team, the police department, begged us for this team. They consisted of all police officers, former police officers, largely from the East Coast and the Midwest. And I had a real problem with that, but after doing a lot of investigation, I said yes. John said yes. And within a month, they were fighting with them too. And they have not found them in compliance as well. And this thing is going on and on. I've met, I don't know how many hours with them, trying to get them into compliance with limited success. In January of this year, John and I announced that we are going to move for receivership if there's not a radical improvement in this calendar year. And we're doing that, frankly, because we've gone to meetings for 8, 9 years. This is the 9th year. And we need to see some real commitment by these officers who are not paying for this, because as the previous speaker said, they don't live here, most of them. I live here for 31 years. We're all paying for this. And unless it's successful, we're simply not going to do it. What is a receivership going to look like? That's hard to say. There's not a single police department in the whole United States that's ever been placed in receivership. But Oakland may be the first. The California prison health system, which is a travesty, has been put in a receivership under Judge Henderson, which they're still under, and there have been significant reforms. It's not necessarily going to be a federal takeover. I don't know that the federal government is going to come in here. It may be a private person. It's really hard to say. We're trying to avoid it because we know that it'll be a phenomenal expensive money, but we cannot continue to negotiate and work with these people when people are getting shot and beaten and there's not enough progress with the completion. So it's a very difficult choice. but it's one we're going to have to make. I want to talk briefly about the crowd control policy because it involves what's going on with Occupy Oakland in particular. I was also on the team which included the National Lawyers Guild and the ACLU, which drafted the crowd control policy. This incident the crowd control case began on April 7th, 2003. Just curious, how many of you were there at the Port of Oakland at that time? Okay. Well, then you know that the Oakland Police Department opened fire on completely nonviolent demonstrators with an array of less than lethal weapons, including grenade launchers, which are used in prisons in ADSEG, because I've done prison work, rubber bullets, dowels. I don't even remember all the different weapons that were used. Nearly 50 people were shot, including longshoremen who were waiting to go to work that day. And one of them was severely injured in his finger. We had people go to the hospital. We had a woman who had 2 operations who was doing nothing but holding a picket sign. So, like with the Riders case, we told them we needed a policy. We needed a crowd control policy so this wouldn't happen again. And I think you know the end game to that story, but let me tell you the beginning and the middle. The crowd control policy has a number of facets to it, and that also can be found online. I found it in a Google search within about a minute, and I am not tech savvy. So I think it's pretty well available. I think it's on the National Lawyers Guild site, to just cite one example. I just want to read a couple of things from the crowd control policy that involves what happened recently here in Oakland. It talks specifically about less than lethal weapons. And it says, less than lethal weapons are only supposed to be used against individuals who are engaged in conduct that poses an immediate threat of loss of life or serious bodily injury to themselves or others when other means of arrest are unsafe, or who is engaging in substantial destruction of property which creates an imminent risk to the lives or safety of other persons, and when the individual can be targeted without endangering other crowd members or bystanders. The policy specifically states that less than lethal weapons may never be used indiscriminately against a crowd or group of persons, even if some members of the crowd or group are violent or disruptive. In other words, there's no excuse for shooting nonviolent protesters just because they happen to be near a violent act, and the police are prohibited from shooting into a crowd unless people's lives are in imminent danger. Clearly, that part of the policy was violated on October 25th, 2011, and numerous times thereafter. The policy also deals with chemical agents, and it says, and I quote, chemical agents can produce fatalities, serious injuries, or even death. The elderly person or infant in the crowd or the individual with asthma or other breathing disorders may have a fatal reaction to chemical agents, even when those chemical agents are used in accordance with the manufacturer's recommendations and the department's training. Gas is only to be used when other police techniques have failed, such as encirclement and police formations, and after clearly audible warnings have been given. The policy specifically calls for OPD to have medical personnel on site when gas is used, and that they should make provision for decontamination and medical screening to those persons affected by chemical agents. They signed this, and it's a federal court order. Now, needless to say, these policies were repeatedly violated in the Occupy Oakland demonstrations. Protesters were shot with less than lethal weapons who were doing nothing more than photographing the police. People were shot because of other people's actions, and even those actions did not authorize the use of less than lethal weapons. Gas was used without adequate warnings, and sometimes with no warnings at all. And not only was there no adequate OPD medical staff on site, in some cases, such as Scott Olson, people who tried to give medical aid were themselves gassed by the police. The failure of the OPD to honor their own agreement in the April 7th is similar to their failure to honor their commitment in the Riders case. Our lawsuit empowered our clients to some degree, and none of us have ever told us they regretted it. Nevertheless, the fact remains that the OPD has failed to honor its commitment to their own agreements and 2 federal court orders. While officials at the University of California at Davis and Berkeley, no matter what we may think of their failings, have apologized for the conduct of their police and even offered to drop criminal charges against the protesters. Officials in Oakland have refused to acknowledge any wrongdoing whatsoever, and instead have singled out conduct they dislike while failing to acknowledge their own wrongdoing. Excuse me. City officials have complained about Occupy Oakland demonstrations, taking the police away from fighting crime, yet they're the ones who filled the jails at Santa Rita and the courthouses with cases, most of which they are not going to win. They have complained about the cost of the demonstrations, yet KTVU, a local station here, recently did a study about the amount of lawsuits paid out for police misconduct cases in the last 11 years. Third was San Jose with $2.8 million. Second was San Francisco with $8.6 million. And first was Oakland with $57 million paid out in police misconduct cases. That's KTVU, the local Fox affiliate study of what's happened here. The city's refusal to acknowledge any responsibility for the predicament they find themselves in is not constructive and will not be helpful to themselves or the people of Oakland. No matter what the truth against individual demonstrators, it is a basic human right, an American right, even in Oakland, to go to a political demonstration and not expect to be injured or arrested because of the actions of someone else. Once you accept the premise you can arrest, beat, or gas someone because of the actions of someone else, you cease to believe in any principles behind our Constitution and our right of citizens to demand redress for their grievances. We as lawyers recognize that we can in no way substitute for you organizing movements across this country. Yet we will do everything we can to hold the City of Oakland accountable for the widespread abuse of their civil rights against members of their own community and the Occupy movement. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Channing. Before I invite up our next guest to do the presentation on police actions against Occupy Oakland, I just want to take a minute to say that the following presentation will include some pretty graphic material, so if you weren't there, you may be seeing some new images of police brutality. I am in no way saying that you should not see this. As a person that doesn't watch TV, I had the unfortunate circumstances of watching the Super Bowl this weekend. And in between images of like graphic, obscene, half-naked women taunting their body parts around, I did see like enormous amounts of violence. I guess that's, I'm sorry I haven't seen TV in like 10 years. So while most of the people in our society are probably desensitized to this violence, I hope that what you see breaks you wide open, breaks your heart. It may bring you to tears. And then I hope that inspires you with some righteous anger to do even more work with your community so we can rebuild our society to embody a different type of culture. Maybe one that elevates women rather than puts them in panties and bathing suits and that's how something has to do with football. So I'd like to welcome up Spencer Mills. I didn't know Spencer's name before this evening. I thought it was Oak for show. And as part of the introduction, I think that Spencer and many others, along with Cop Watch and the many other like radical indie Bay media folks, thank you for making this visible.
So, apologies if this is a little bit disheveled. The goal here is not to demonize the police. We simply intend to show a complete and total lack of organizational control, a refusal to comply with their own crowd control policies, and an unwillingness to comply with the American policing standards. We'll review some of OPD's own use of force policy. It is essential to recognize that all members of a crowd and demonstrators are not the same, even when some members of a crowd engage in violence or destruction of property. Other members of the crowd are not participating in those tactics. Chemical agents can produce serious injuries or even death. The elderly persons or infant in the crowd or the individual with asthma or other breathing disorder may have fatal reaction to chemical agents, even when those chemical agents are used in accordance with the manufacturer's recommendations and the department's training. Hand-thrown chemical agents or pyrotechnic gas dispersal devices shall be used only if other techniques such as encirclement and mass arrest or police formations have failed or will not accomplish the policing goal as determined by the incident commander. The use of hand-thrown chemical agents or pyrotechnic gas dispersal devices may present a risk of permanent loss of hearing or serious bodily injury from shrapnel. Said devices shall be deployed to explode at a safe distance from the crowd to minimize the risk of personal injury.
Yeah, right.
The following videos you're going to see, the first is ground level explosions happening at the during October 25th. Then you will see an elevated video from October 25th from a helicopter, and finally you will see the Scott Olson incident where individuals rush in attempting to rescue him, and a police officer nonchalantly throws a flashbang in the middle of this crowd. So 3 videos in quick succession.
And then even before the minutes passed, they just started shooting off. And then after even the fact that everybody left, they kept shooting.
All of that, again, was in response to a few thrown projectiles and bottles and totally disproportionate use of force and totally against OPD's own crowd control policies. After these incidents, then Interim Chief Jordan held a press conference and immediately afterward and said that tear gas was used because his officers were forced to defend themselves. Later, the OPD Chief of Staff would retract this claim, saying that this was based on Jordan's preliminary belief. Another incident when then Interim Chief Jordan received an update that crime was actually down 19% in the last week of October. He wrote an email to one of Mayor Gene Kwan's advisors. I'm not sure how you want to share this good news, he wrote. It may be counter to our statement that the Occupy movement is negatively impacting crime in Oakland.
Right.
This next set of slides are filled with facts from OPD's own dispatch records obtained via public record. This is the Travelers Aid Building on November 2nd. A small group of occupiers had autonomously gone over and taken over this empty space. OPD dispatch at 11:25 p.m. suggested that intelligence states music, dancing, waving flags around, no disturbance, just a party. Less than 20 minutes later comes the 11:44 p.m. dispatch. Need a saturated effort. Need to flood the streets with police. In Santa Cruz, a similar incident, 75 occupiers took over a building. Santa Cruz Police Department waited them out and ended the situation with no violence. OPD unfortunately chose to turn what was described as a non-disturbance into basically a war zone, all in the span of about 30 minutes. The November 2nd Travelers Aid dispatches continue. The 11:55 p.m. announcement to disperse, the first order to disperse was given at 11:55. In the same minute, explosions, flashbangs, tear gas started. At 11:57 p.m., dispatches say we see a lot of people running. Again, the exact same minute that the first dispersal order was given, flashbangs, tear gas, all being used, and this is from, again, their own dispatches. When reasonably, this again is crowd control policy, when reasonably necessary for protection of the officers or to disperse individuals in the crowd pursuant to the procedures of this policy, batons may be used in a pushing or jabbing motion. Baton jabs should not be used indiscriminately against a crowd or a group of persons, but only against individuals who are physically aggressive or actively resisting arrest. This next video is what happened to Kayvon Savecki, another Army veteran. Kayvon Savecki, again, second Army veteran injured by the Oakland Police Department. He suffered a lacerated spleen from his beating. He was put in a jail cell and denied medical attention for 16 hours and then finally rushed to the emergency department in critical condition. Direct fired, specialty impact, less than lethal munitions, SIM, apologies, may be used against a specific individual who is engaging in conduct that poses an immediate threat of loss of life or serious bodily injury to himself or herself, officers, or the general public, or who is endangering substantial destruction of property, or engaging in substantial destruction of property, which creates an imminent risk to the lives or safety of other persons. In such instances, direct fired SIM shall be used only when other means of arrest are unsafe and when the individual can be targeted without endangering other crowd members or bystanders. This video, most of you have probably seen. It's of Scott Campbell, also known as Angry White Kid on Twitter. Yeah, this is his video.
Is this okay? Is this okay?
The next slide is the resulting injury Scott Campbell received as a result of being shot. Again, another crowd control policy. Any person struck by a round shall be transported to a hospital for observation and any necessary treatment. Ambulance service, if required, shall be ordered per General Order I-4. First aid, when necessary, shall be administered per Training Bulletin IIIK. Scott Campbell was not offered any medical assistance. I don't even know if medical assistance was there, but he wasn't offered any medical assistance, and he was only treated by Occupy Oakland medics. The media shall be permitted to observe and shall be permitted close enough access to the arrestees to record their names. Even after a dispersal order has been given, clearly identified media shall be permitted to carry out their professional duties in any area where arrests are being made, unless their presence would unduly interfere with enforcement action. I actually now carry this around on my person. This is a photograph of Susie Cagle taken. She's a local journalist and cartoonist. This was taken on November 2nd, and again, OPD was arresting journalists. I believe she also has the unique distinction of being the only journalist arrested twice at Occupy protests. The next set of videos are all videos of officers without badge numbers, badges, or names being shown. This is what Judge Felton Henderson said was the most serious level of misconduct, which is why there are so many examples in this presentation. Here you go.
But that is kind of weird that you actually are not showing your name. Why is that? It's a simple question. Simple question. Excuse me, Sergeant. Mr. Wong. Actually, he's a lieutenant. May I speak with you, sir? Yes, sir. Is it against policy for cops to hide their name badges? Shouldn't it be in plain view? He has it on tape. Isn't that wrong? It's taped up. Isn't that wrong for him to do that? Isn't that against policy? No, riding a bicycle. We were on the street. Isn't that against policy? That is against policy, right? He just turned off his camera too. He just turned off his camera too. Thank you. That's all. We want to be fair. All you have to do is say it. Yeah, you know.
I'd like your badge number, please. Are you going to give me your badge number? You have a legal obligation to give me your badge number. Excuse me, sir, am I allowed to walk through here? I'd like to have your badge number, please. Do you have a reason for not giving me that?
Who you guys are from, because you don't even have any identification of any kind showing. You have no precinct badge, nothing. You don't have your name showing, you don't have any badge numbers. You're all breaking the law right now. You're breaking the law. 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 Not only you're breaking the law. You're breaking the law. You're breaking the law. I don't even know where you're from. I don't even know where you're from.
This is a real movie, right?
You not know. Will you please show me your identification? You have a responsibility as an employee of the city that I pay for to show me your identification, please. You don't believe that? It's against the law for you to not show me your identification, ma'am. Is there a reason why you feel like you don't need to show me your identification? Are any of you this woman's superior because I've asked her to identify herself and she refuses? She has a responsibility to identify herself. Will you please remind her of that? Because I've asked her several times to show me her name tag. Excuse me? Officer Cross has a responsibility herself to show me her name tag. I've asked her several times and she refuses. Badge number 465.
Wear a badge, nameplate, or other device which bears clearly on its face the identification number or name of the officer. Thank you. Officer, can you tell us your name and badge number? If
you interfere with us and what we're doing right now, you're going to go to jail. So I suggest you wait till I'm done.
You're in violation. You're in violation of the law.
You're in violation of 148. So step away from here while we're dealing with the situation.
How far do I need to? How far away do I need to step?
Way back.
Oh, wow.
So again, instead of just simply giving his name and badge number, he threatened the individual, asking him with arrest. Another OPD crowd control policy. The following factors will be considered prior to determining what action to take. Number 1, will police action likely improve the situation? During a peaceful Thanksgiving afternoon, OPD chose to escalate and start a serious confrontation or riot over a porta potty paid for by Occupy Oakland.
This is horrible.
A porta potty.
A porta potty.
Will
I think they'd be a little smarter when they realize they're outnumbered.
the police action likely improve the situation?
No.
No.
Hell no.
This is, well, the next set of slides are having to do with the West Coast port shutdown, the port shutdown on December 12th. There was no violence or vandalism throughout the day, and as a result, Mayor Kwan, unable to condemn protesters for violence or vandalism, decided to condemn Occupy for economic violence.
Seriously?
With regards to the 24-hour vigil, peaceful protest and vigil should have been what the City of Oakland wanted of Occupy. Instead, OPD used the vigil to begin a new set of tactics and basically initiate a war on Occupy. The photograph is of the interfaith community with their interfaith umbrella at the 24-hour vigil. On December 16th, there was a raid on the plaza by OPD, and people were cited for such things as pushing a cart, umbrella, and bike. This is what I would, and many others would classify as harassment through selective enforcement. Also, there were arrests on December 16th, one of which happened to be Kali, who happened to be turning his life around at Occupy Oakland, and he was arrested while sitting on a bench in the middle of the afternoon with a blanket. He was put in solitary confinement without charges for several days and denied psychiatric medication at Santa Rita. After days of incarceration without necessary medication, he's then accused of assaulting a correctional officer. Now, of course, he could spend life in prison. And now we have Occupy.
I'm on a
This was a man-made rap, which the builders will dutifully inform you that was in accordance to code. The community response to Occupy was overwhelmingly positive. People would drive by and honk. Even local fire would drive by and laugh. And basically, the community response to Occupy was tremendous, and people loved it. OPD chose to bring down 12 full police cars with officers to get on a pontoon boat and drive out to the raft and handcuff and detain the 3 peaceful occupiers for 45 minutes. It actually seemed a lot longer than that on the ground before charging them with a minor citation for boat on lake. OPD complains that Occupy forces them to waste resources, but no one forced them to send 12 full police cars to cite 3 peaceful protesters on a lake that had received, tremendously positive support from the community.
Call the police, there's a boat on a lake.
Looking at this photograph right here, which was taken near 10th and Mandela, looking at this photo, you would think that this was a major crime scene or situation. Instead, this was the OPD response to a program run by Casa Justa, ironically an organization just praised by the city manager's office in a press release. Occupy Oakland and Casa Justa were fixing up a house in West Oakland there at 10th and Mandela. The ownership of the property was being disputed in civil court between Fannie Mae and Casa Justa. OPD chose to bypass that civil court and treat this as a criminal matter, wasting scant resources and ignoring serious crime. Again, the home was being used to deliver workshops to homeowners in different stages of the foreclosure process. This has to do with the plaza raid on December 30th. Erroneous citations and arrests of people sitting on benches wasn't enough. OPD chose to escalate to arresting occupiers on other trumped-up charges. What you're going to see here is one officer's response to why people are being arrested on December 30th.
Excuse me, officer, can you say why people are arrested?
No permit for the property here.
What? No what?
The officer stated, no permit for property. This may indeed be an infraction, but it is not an arrestable offense. During this raid, 2 people of color were arrested for lynching. Lynching charges were designed to stop white mobs from hanging black men. It's a 1933 law. It's rarely been used in the past 30 years, but it's now being used against protesters of color in Oakland. Those arrested on this day endured horrific conditions in OPD custody. 7 hours in a van with no food, water, bathroom, fresh air, or light. Hands were turning blue from handcuffs too tight as well. OPD crowd control policy. Officers should be cognizant that flex cuffs may tighten when arrestees' hands swell or move, sometimes simply in response to pain from the cuffs themselves. When arrestees complain of pain from overly tight flex cuffs, members shall examine the cuffs to ensure proper fit. We all know that this hasn't happened on several different occasions. What you're looking at here is a picture of the vigil on January 2nd. What you see is the symbolic teepee and a crowd of peaceful demonstrators attending the vigil. What is referred to as the teepee raid happened on January 3rd, the next day. In a press release, Chief Jordan, then Interim Chief Jordan, said he was canceling the vigil's permit due to occupiers near a vigil with food, garbage cans, and blankets. Police chose to take this time to perform a tactical raid on the peaceful vigil. Taken from public record police reports, 3 women were arrested while singing "This Little Light of Mine." 1 was violently thrown to the ground while not resisting in any way. In custody, 2 men again were screaming in agony from cuffs that were too tight, yet OPD refused to loosen them. This next video is a video of Adam Katz being arrested during this TP raid.
Tell me what line!
Behind the line.
I'm listening to it. Tell me what line!
Behind the line.
I don't see the line! What line?
This is not it.
Tell me what line! I am backing up! Tell me what line after behind! Tell me what line after behind! Okay! Why don't you just tell me that? I'm leaving! I'm leaving! Why am I being arrested?
Go with it, Mr. Kessler, go with it.
Why am I being arrested?
Let go.
Am I free to leave? Am I being detained?
No, you're being arrested.
Why am I being arrested?
Step back.
I step back!
He asked you to step back
You can
and
see
you
in
did.
this video that they were telling him to back up across the line, and then that changed to across the street, and all the time he was backing up. It's very clear, the video speaks for itself. This video is from the first FTP march. FTP march is, of course, our indirect response to all of the misconduct that OPD has laid out upon Occupy. So this is from January 6th, and what you will witness here is police essentially running through the crowd with no dispersal order or warning, creating panic, creating injuries.
They're running now, people. They're running down the block with OPD. They're really chasing.
Oh shit, I was hella scared all night this night.
OPD just beat the crap out of this guy. This is the sergeant from earlier with us.
Basically, again, no dispersal order given, no warning given, panic caused. The next video is of a fellow occupier and member of the kitchen crew who goes around feeding people all the time. being knocked off her bike and wailed on with batons.
Love you, Leela!
We're on the sidewalk here. You have to leave us alone. Hey! What the hell? Get her!
The next set of slides is from Move-In Day, January 28th, where we experienced new tactics. OPD chose to start marching aggressively behind protesters, even peaceful protesters, attacking the most vulnerable who may move too slowly. At the back of the march, if you guys were there, you would remember that the Children's Village was marching at the back of the march. The back of the march was filled with elderly individuals out supporting Occupy Oakland. Move-In Day. The next two videos show violence by police before there was any altercations, destruction of property, or any notice to disperse before the Kaiser Center during the initial few blocks of the march that day. This video is of an elderly gentleman being basically pushed to the ground, where he hits the back of his head on the ground.
Of course people start flashing. What the hell?
Charles in hand.
Again, this was before any incidents of tear gas, any incidents of flashbangs, any orders to disperse, anything happened that day. This was on the initial march to a building, and this was at the back of the march where the Children's Village was and where those that were slow were. This again, we repeat this use of force policy because, of course, it corresponds directly with the following videos. Again, the use of hand-thrown chemical agents or pyrotechnic gas dispersal devices may present a risk of permanent loss of hearing or serious bodily injury from shrapnel. Said devices shall be deployed to explode at a safe distance from the crowd to minimize the risk of personal injury. This next video that you will see is at 10th and Oak Street. This took place, of course, after the initial incident at the Kaiser Center. Again, disproportionate use of force. This also, you would notice that the shields moved up to protect the man on the ground while calling for a medic. I'm actually very sympathetic to those individuals that bring shields out to the march, given what Occupy Oakland has had fired at them by OPD in the past. The reason I actually carried a camera around was initially to try and hold OPD accountable and protect fellow protesters, so I'm highly sympathetic to those that bring out shields. The next video we're going to see here is of Move-In Day on January 28th from an elevated position in an apartment at 19th and Telegraph. It's an extended clip.
This guy's asking why he needs to disperse from this park. Police have blocked out this corner over here, preventing any kind of exit. They've blocked out this exit. They've blocked out this exit. These people really don't have anywhere where they can go. And the police are running into the crowd and hitting people with batons and pointing guns at them. Right here we got some police pointing weapons at the crowd who's blocked in. They have nowhere to go. These people can't leave. But they're being told to disperse. It doesn't really make any sense. That bright light from overhead is a helicopter spotlight. This is crazy. These people really can't, they have nowhere to go. They're all being told to back up, but there's nowhere to go but deeper into the center of the park. And if there's not enough cops to rush into the center of the park, all they could do is hold these four corners. So they're just blocking people in until more reinforcements arrive, I think. Who knows what they'll do at that point. But they're definitely not letting these people disperse. This is just so I don't seem like my video is one-sided. These people, this is directly outside my apartment window. I'm not necessarily trying to speak out against the police, other than my concerns as a local resident. I was threatened with arrest earlier for walking down the sidewalk near my house, and it was exactly this type of thing. There was nowhere to go. It was just get off the sidewalk, this is our sidewalk. You know, without location, without any rationale, without any reasoning. You know, it was requested that I leave immediately, and I was just trying to get home. Anyway, I hope these people are able to stay safe tonight. I think the real threat to public safety here is the police more than this crowd. I mean, these people aren't doing anything other than trying to protest. It's the motorcycle. Not sure what's going on with the motorcycle cops. It looks like they're blocking off. Looks like they're blocking off Telegraph, so no one has any visibility to what's going on in this area. There's a couple cars still getting through, but yeah, it's really not clear what all these police. There's got to be a couple hundred officers here. Oh man, okay, we got flash things going off over here. They're running into the crowd and hitting people with batons. Not sure if that's flashbangs or gas or just smoke.
So again, protesters there were locked in to that block right there, that park at 19th and Telegraph, not given a dispersal order. And even if there is some miscommunication as to whether or not there was a dispersal order there, or not even if there was a dispersal order, given there was no exit for protesters, and then flashbangs and tear gas were used on them with no route of escape. I want you guys to remember that you heard no dispersal order in that video, because it's going to become very clear in the next video. Well, you'll understand. Another OPD use of force policy. After a crowd disperses pursuant to a declaration of unlawful assembly, and subsequently participants assemble at a different geographic location where participants are engaged in a nonviolent, lawful First Amendment activity, such an assembly cannot be dispersed unless it has been determined that it is an unlawful assembly and the required official declaration has been adequately given. Earlier in the day, in the morning, there was a dispersal order given at the Kaiser Center. It can be heard on videos, but that was hours and hours before what you're about to see.
in front of the YMCA on Broadway, between 24th and 23rd on Broadway here. They're now saying everybody's under arrest.
So again, there were full unedited footage stemming from all the way back at 19th and Telegraph, uninterrupted all the way through that moment, and you did not hear a single dispersal order, though they said they gave 3. Again, that dispersal order, or that arrest order, was unmistakable, and if they were using the same PA system to give dispersal orders, whether at 19th and Telegraph, in the march over from 19th and Telegraph to the YMCA, or at the YMCA, you would have clearly heard it. We skipped one slide here, but it's basically another OPD use of force policy. Individuals may not be arrested based on their association with a crowd in which unlawful activity has occurred. There must be probable cause for each individual arrest. This principle means the officer must have objective facts based on his own knowledge or information given him by other officers sufficient to believe that each specific individual being arrested committed the offense. Thus, the only proper basis for a multiple simultaneous arrest of all the individuals encircled at a demonstration is failure to disperse, Penal Code Section 409. When the dispersal was properly ordered based on the existence of an unlawful assembly, an adequate notice and opportunity to disperse has been given. Again, none of that happened, and 409 people were subsequently arrested or detained, and many were brutalized outside the YMCA. And actually what you're about to see now is one of those said incidents, with a protester being pulled out of the crowd that was kettle blocked in to on the right front steps of the YMCA.
Streaming live to the whole entire world.
Some statistics from Moving Day. 6 journalists were arrested or detained. 409 people were illegally arrested or detained. Those arrested faced horrific conditions in custody. Many were denied medication, including one occupier with MS that was denied her medication while in prison. 7 hours were spent on a sidewalk in handcuffs by many of these protesters. Up to 50 hours were spent in custody while being processed, and 25 people were being shoved into cells designed for 5 people. Many people had to stand for days because there was no room to sit. With regards to medics and legal observers, number one, these are vital jobs. These folks that come out as legal observers, I'm sure you've all seen them come out in bright neon green hats, and medics wear big red crosses on their arms and on their chests. Generally, medics and legal observers are usually at or very near the front of the line, and so they've been regularly arrested or detained. Again, another OPD crowd control policy. A supervisor or commander may allow a person who self-identifies as a legal observer or crowd monitor to remain in an area after a dispersal order if circumstances permit and if the person's presence would not unduly interfere with the enforcement action. OPD claims to seek to improve the relationship with the community. Arresting people who are there specifically to help seems contrary to this goal. After all of the misconduct that you've seen, after everything that you've just seen, one officer has been disciplined or suspended for covering his name tag, and his lieutenant has been demoted. The acting chief, interim chief, who has now been promoted to Oakland Police Chief, with all of this going on. I believe we've shown widespread problems, serious problems throughout the chain of command, lack of organizational control. We've shown officers believe they can act with impunity by hiding name badges. Now, the mayor and the police chief have stated that the one video, the first video you saw by Black Pixels, was an isolated incident. I believe we've shown it to be a widespread incident, with widespread incidents, pardon me. We've seen repeated use of disproportionate force, and OPD consistently violating their own crowd control policies.
And our constitutional rights.
This was an excerpt from a CNN article written by Ruben Navarrete. Police officers have the power to either make their job simpler or more difficult. If they treat people well and build relations, people will cooperate. They'll have leads, witnesses, and informants. But if they see the people they're supposed to protect and serve in the way an occupying army sees the native population, they're going to encounter resistance, suspicion, defiance, and other things that make their job harder. That's a recipe for chaos. Meanwhile, these mini armies are always on the lookout for the next battle, and as events in Oakland and around the country suggest, they'll usually find it. Solutions. What are the solutions? And I mean, that's for you guys to think about. Essentially, we've heard from Jim Shannon about possible federal takeover of OPD, but it's for all of us to think about and discuss in the near future. Thank you for listening.
Federal It's going to get better. Everybody needs to remember that. You already had them.
Thank you, Spencer. We're going to go ahead and take an intermission. Why don't we take about a 10 to 15 minute break? There are counselors and chaplains in the lobby if you want to discuss some things with them, folks. They're there for your support, your well-being. We're also going to ask for maybe 1 or 2 volunteers. We'd like to pass around the popcorn bag and hopefully get some donations for the folks that helped put this event on this evening, as well as for this lovely space. We want to make sure that we can continue to use it. So also, you can, there's some snacks and popcorn up front. Please support the theater. And lastly, I have the privilege of knowing some of the folks that are here in attendance this evening. If you are new to this community, to this family, make sure you introduce yourself. There are some really, really lovely people here.